Millionaire discovers inspiring homeless woman teaching his 8-year-old daughter an amazing lesson. Jonathan shifted nervously in the back seat of his black luxury sedan, his palms clammy against the leather seat as they inched through the congested streets of the city. The gala was just hours away, and his phone buzzed incessantly with updates from the boardroom, the latest projections, the desperate pleas for more resources. He could almost hear his colleagues' voices echoing in his head, their relentless ambition and invisible chain pulling him deeper into the corporate maze. He longed to shed the weight of it all, but the fear of failure gripped him like an iron claw. "Daddy, can we go over there?" Mia's cheerful voice cut through his spiraling thoughts as she pointed to a storefront. A gust of wind carried the bitter smell of street food and exhaust, urging him to comply before he lost sight of her innocent joy. He hesitated, his urge to avoid distraction clashing with the tiny voice of guilt whispering that she deserved more than his distracted presence. With a reluctant nod, he stepped out into the sunlight, but as they approached, his heart sank. Nestled under the faded awning sat Clara, an elderly woman with deep lines etched across her weathered skin and a simple sign before her: the value of kindness. Jonathan's instinct was to hurry past, but something about Clara's gaze held him. Mia, on the other hand, was captivated. Without a trace of hesitation, she sat beside the woman, her small frame dwarfed by life's burdens. "Hi, what's your name?" Mia beamed, her eyes sparkling with genuine curiosity. Jonathan watched as Clara unfolded stories that danced in the air like the fluttering leaves above them. Tales of faded dreams, laughter amidst struggle, and moments of unexpected kindness shaped a world he had long forgotten. Jonathan's fingers tightened around the edges of his briefcase, wrestling with the unease that threatens to consume him. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. In that moment, as Clara's laughter drifted lightly into the air, Jonathan felt a rift begin to form inside him. He framed every decision around profit, each board meeting a meticulously crafted dance toward success. But this woman, this homeless woman, revealed riches he had overlooked: kindness, compassion, the beauty of human connection. Mia, absorbing every word, was flourishing in a world Jonathan rarely acknowledged. He felt aware, painfully so, of the chasm widening between his ambitions and what made life meaningful. Days turned into weeks. The simplest visits became a ritual Mia cherished. He noticed the shifts in her small gestures, every small act of kindness, every effort to understand and uplift others. With every trip to see Clara, Jonathan felt a tightening knot of panic in his chest. His project launch loomed ominously, threatening to displace Clara and her fellow neighbors for profit margins dressed as urban development. Each email he opened whispered reminders of the empire he built, yet the warmth blooming in Mia's heart contrasted starkly with the hollow ache inside him. Then came the weekend that would change everything. Mia, wide-eyed and bubbling with excitement, invited Clara to their apartment for a surprise. As he prepared to welcome them, Jonathan felt the facade of control he had maintained begin to crack. The word family hung heavy in the air, filled with implications. Had he become the man who valued success over integrity? As he turned to face them, his resolve faltered. The innocence in Mia's eyes burst through his defenses like sunlight through a storm. What would he choose? The siren call of wealth or the tender heartbeat of decency? The sinking weight of his choices bore down on him, leaving him to grapple with the notion of how he might forever lose the most precious thing he had: the integrity of being a good father. Standing there, amidst the shadows of a life built on ambition, Jonathan felt the hefty silence hanging in the air, waiting for him to make a choice, to confront the very essence of what it meant to be truly successful. Jonathan's heart raced as Clara entered their home, her presence filling the space with an energy that contrasted sharply with the cold decorum of his sleek suburban life. The warmth in Mia's laughter lit up the room, drawing Jonathan out of his head and into the moment. He had prepared his home almost like a stage, but now he felt like an unwilling actor trapped in a narrative that felt untrue. "Clara, we're so glad you could come," Mia exclaimed, her voice lifting with joy. Jonathan watched as Clara knelt down, meeting Mia at her level, their eyes locking in a silent understanding. "Thank you for inviting me, sweet girl," Clara replied, her voice a soft melody of warmth. As they settled into the cozy living room, Jonathan found himself standing back, unsure how to fit into this tableau of innocence and kindness. Mia guided Clara towards the array of toys strewn across the floor, revealing the extension of her youthful spirit. They began to play with an abandon that made Jonathan instinctively tense. What was he doing, allowing a homeless woman into his home, into their lives, knowing the financial burden he was under? The weight of his decisions bore down further as Clara engaged with Mia, showing her how to create intricate shapes with building blocks, and infinite possibilities filled the room with laughter. Jonathan's thoughts spiraled. He had always believed in providing, but this was not what he had envisioned as providing a healthy life for Mia. It always involved security, success. Yet, watching them, he couldn't shake the realization that perhaps he was missing the mark. "Daddy, can you join us?" Mia called out, pulling him into the moment. He inhaled sharply, that invitation a lifeline of belonging and connection that was beginning to feel foreign. "I'm busy right now," he replied, though he hated the sound of those words escaping his lips. What was work when measured against this happiness that filled the room? Clara looked at him with eyes that bore the weight of life's experiences, a knowing gaze that cut through his defenses. It hit him. She had seen the world's darkness and still chose to embody joy, kindness, and patience. "I made a choice too once," she said slowly, her voice steady, "between what the world tells you to value and what truly matters. It's easy to get lost in what's expected of us." In that moment, Jonathan felt exposed, like she could see right through the carefully constructed image he had folded around himself like a shield. The afternoon stretched languidly, an uninhibited display of joy swirling around him, Mia and Clara oblivious to his internal turmoil. Their laughter settled like a soft balm on his restless mind. But as he watched Clara teach Mia not just about the toys, but also deeper life lessons hidden within their playful interactions, Jonathan was struck by a fear he couldn't ignore. What if Mia chose kindness over wealth? What if she didn't follow in his corporate footsteps, instead veering into uncharted territory driven by compassion? He was a man who had sacrificed so much for perceived success, yet here he was, a father paralyzed by the possibility of losing his child to a path he deemed unwise. "Can I ask you something, Clara?" he said abruptly, stepping into their playful bubble. The room fell silent. "How do I teach my daughter about kindness in a world that often rewards greed? How do I ensure she understands both?" The question hung heavily in the air, a tangible strain between them. Clara smiled softly, but his apprehension didn't waver. He needed answers. He needed certainty. "Sometimes just being present is the greatest gift you can give," she replied. With those words, a new sense of urgency sparked within him, challenging the status quo he had been so rigidly trying to maintain. In the quiet that followed her statement, the path before Jonathan twisted in ways he had never expected. The walls he had so meticulously built began to tremble, and a choice loomed on the horizon, a confrontation with himself, a sacred reckoning with values he had placed on the shelf. Would he be willing to redefine what success meant? He looked deep into Mia's face, lit with excitement and hope, and felt a decision crystallizing in the depths of his being. The time had come to face his fears, to unravel the man he thought he had to be. Jonathan leaned back against the wall, a determined look crossing his face. He was ready to pursue change, but first he needed to confront the man in the mirror that he had avoided for far too long. Could he emerge from that confrontation as the father Mia truly deserved? The air thickened with anticipation. The time of reckoning was fast approaching. Jonathan stood alone in the corner of the room, the sounds of laughter reverberating around him like a distant echo. The two figures, Clara and Mia, were intertwined in a world rich with color and imagination. The walls, once impenetrable and a fortress for his rationality, now felt constricting, closing in on him as Clara's words transformed from gentle wisdom to a resounding challenge within his mind. What does it mean to be present, he wondered, feeling the gravity of her statement weigh against the ideals that had governed his life. They seemed so limited now, like a prison cell masquerading as a castle. His success had always been measured by his ability to remain distant, unemotional, and focused. But those attributes felt hollow as he watched Clara instill a spirit of empathy in Mia. He grappled with the knowledge that perhaps he had equated his own ambition with neglect, a malady of ambition that had distanced him from the joy of connection. Can I really make a different choice? The question gnawed at him as he considered stepping out from the shadows of his own expectations. Yet inertia held him captive. Instead of approaching, he retreated inward, sifting through memories of his own childhood. A precariously balanced existence of academic accolades, competitive sports, and the relentless pursuit of validation weighed heavily on his psyche. Was that an upbringing worth replicating or one to critique? Clara, he ventured hesitantly, drawn toward the luminous space she created. What do you see when you look at me? Her probing gaze met his, and for a heartbeat he feared the answer might shatter his fragile construction. I see a father desperate for clarity, struggling to reconcile what he considers success with what might truly nurture a life, she replied, her voice unyielding yet filled with compassion. Jonathan's instincts screamed at him. He had never shared his vulnerabilities so openly. The history of his accomplishments flashed through his mind, generating a mixture of pride and embarrassment. He suddenly sensed his definition of success was a gilded cage obscuring a boundless field of options. With a forced breath, he shifted the focus back to Mia and Clara, absorbing their lightness, their joy, and the unrestrained laughter that pierced through his walls. Maybe true success is finding happiness outside the corporate ladder, he reflected, igniting a flicker of resolve within. As the two women sat surrounded by toys, he realized they were teaching lessons that transcended play. Clara was nurturing qualities he had all but dismissed: empathy, kindness, connection. Jonathan felt a stirring within himself, a drive to be part of that lesson rather than a mere observer anchored by skepticism. The girl he loved, the innocence he cherished, their laughter sang. Of a world he had long strayed from, one swollen with possibilities that did not need high-rise offices or congratulatory emails. If he was willing to unmask his truths, how could he redirect his efforts towards a life that embodies kindness and provides the richness of experience he sought for Mia? I need to reach her, he thought. I need to be the father Mia deserves. His heart pulled him, demanding he take that first step toward this new vision. Yet doubt lingered, whispering fears that mastery of self would be a different path entirely. Will you join us, Jonathan? Clara's voice broke through his contemplations, warm and inviting. The straightforward inquiry pierced the static in his mind, summoning the courage he believed could be buried under responsibilities and pretense. In that moment, Jonathan felt an epiphany unfold. Vulnerability could become his vehicle to growth. The fear of being insufficient, of modeling failure, could instead shift into an opportunity for both perception and action. He took a decisive step forward into the circle of play, the tension in his chest easing as he crouched beside them, curiosity igniting. "What are we building?" His voice steadied, drenched in newfound determination. As Mia and Clara beamed at him, a small part of his former self crumbled, making room for a freshly inspired Jonathan, one who could teach and learn simultaneously. "Let's find out together." Clara's eyes sparkled, and mirroring that light, Jonathan felt a burgeoning hope. This was the threshold of reconciliation, the path stretching out before him, marked by clarity rather than obscurity. But as the anticipation crackled, he recognized that the confrontation with himself was only beginning. As they immersed themselves in creativity, Jonathan wondered, beyond mere play, what would it take for him to fully embrace this new role? What aspects of his past would he need to reconcile to become the father Mia wanted and the man he was destined to be? The answers loomed ahead, tantalizing yet elusive. With each deliberate breath, Jonathan felt the warmth of Mia's laughter wrap around him like a comforting blanket, urging him to cast aside the hesitations that had plagued him for so long. To be present, that was the challenge and the paradox. His life had been a series of calculated maneuvers, yet here, crouched with Clara and Mia, he sensed the foundations of that life shifting underfoot. Mia's eyes sparkled with excitement as she described the imaginative world they were crafting with blocks and figures. Jonathan participated with a tentative hand, his movements initially cautious, almost mechanical. But as he watched Mia's enthusiastic gestures and Clara's calm encouragement, something within him began to unravel, loosening the tightly bound strands of his conditioning. "Look, Daddy, it's a palace for the fairy," Mia exclaimed, her voice brimming with unfiltered delight, as she placed the last block carefully atop a rocky formation. The innocence in her joy reached into Jonathan's chest, igniting a flicker of something alien yet achingly familiar. In that moment, he wanted to be her ally, her— "May I add something?" he asked. This small inquiry, an act of rebellion against the authoritative distance he had harbored for years. Clara's approving nod encouraged his participation, and he found his fingers instinctually reaching for a brightly colored figure, adding it to the scene. "What if the fairy had a friend to help her rule the kingdom?" he suggested, his own curiosity surprising him. As he spoke, Clara leaned in closer, a soft smile forming on her lips. "Absolutely! Friends make the best companions in adventures," she replied. Jonathan marveled at how easily Clara engaged in this world of make-believe, her presence soothing the tension in his shoulders. With every layer that he added to their play, he felt a piece of his past gradually seem less essential. Compelled to explore these feelings of connection, Jonathan began to ask himself deeper questions. What were the underlying fears that had kept him from being this version of himself with Mia? What did it really mean to share joy, to abandon self-imposed barriers of success for plain moments of laughter and collaboration? As the minutes passed, the blocks resembled more than just a typical structure. They transformed into a metaphor for his own challenges. Each piece he placed was a symbol of the walls he had built around himself, walls fashioned for success but structured with neglect. "Isn't it beautiful, Daddy?" Mia's question jerked him back into the present moment. He watched her eyes shine, illuminated by a spirit that was untouched by adult prior judgments and fears. "Yes, it is!" he exclaimed, the conviction in his voice stronger than it had been a moment before. Yet it opened a floodgate of other possibilities, exposing the vulnerability he felt creeping back in. The internal battle had not lessened, rather it had just shifted gears. In this cocoon of creativity, Jonathan wondered if he could sustain this newfound presence outside the confines of play. Could I unlock this in my daily responsibilities? Could I teach empathy while pursuing ambition? He pondered. A vital realization struck him. He had an opportunity not just to reshape his role as a father, but to redefine success itself. A construct built not solely on achievements, but interconnectedness, nurture, and presence. These questions remained swirling in his mind, each stirring further determination and discomfort alike. What would it mean to confront the professional world that so highly valued productivity, but often overlooked the human aspect? Just then, the doorbell rang, slicing through his reverie. Clara rose to another task, leaving Jonathan with Mia and the unfinished kingdom still pregnant with possibility. The chime echoed, calling him back to different responsibilities, not just as an employee, but as a father who had pledged to change. As he glanced at Mia's expectant expression, he understood that he needed to make decisions that honored the lessons learned today. Maybe new foundations start with small gestures, he thought. Just then, he realized this was only the beginning of a deeper journey. Not just for him, but for Mia as well. He needed to shape conversations that brought truth and connection back into his professional life. Could he merge the lessons from play with what awaited outside? Rising from the ground with renewed resolve, Jonathan felt the weight of possibility on his shoulders. The echoes of laughter lingered in the air, but the next challenge loomed ahead. As he prepared to answer the door, an unsettling thought crossed his mind. What if opening that door meant confronting the very strategies that had kept him shackled? The thought flickered like a warning light, teasing the boundaries of the transformation he sought to undertake. As Jonathan opened the door, he braced himself for the usual interruptions that came with parenthood and adulthood. But this time, what lay beyond it would pose a challenge far greater than he anticipated. Standing on the threshold was an elderly woman, her face weathered and wise, contrasting sharply with his carefully tailored life. Her presence exuded a profound, almost magnetic energy that drew Jonathan's attention away from the chaos within. "Good afternoon," she greeted, her voice warm and somehow soothing. "My name is Agnes, and I believe your daughter might need a little help with her imaginative journey." Before Jonathan could compose a response, he noticed Mia's excited gasp, her eyes lighting up as if she recognized an ally in this unexpected visitor. Something within him stirred, the gears of his conditioned mind grinding against the warmth of the moment. This brief contact with Agnes unleashed a complex wave of emotions, and he felt his internal conflict escalate. How do you mean?" Jonathan asked, hesitating. "Creativity is often born from the unexpected," Agnes replied, her gaze steady and deep, as though she could see not only into Jonathan's soul but also into the aspirations of the child standing beside him. Mia clapped her hands, reveling in the prospect of new play. "Can you stay and play with us?" she asked, her innocence cutting through Jonathan's reservations like a knife. Jonathan felt a prick of discomfort keenly etched into his professional exterior, the years of adulthood glaring through the unpolished beauty of childhood's playfulness. Part of him wanted to shut the door, reinstate the boundary of normalcy, the cocoon of orderliness. Yet, as he studied Agnes's unpretentious smile, a flicker of curiosity broke through his walls. What if she, an apparent stranger, held a missing piece of the puzzle he hadn't even known was scattered in the shadows of his mindset? "Sure, why not?" Jonathan heard himself say, though the words felt foreign rolling out of his mouth. As Agnes entered, a quaint, defeated softness filled the air. Her worn hands clutched a small bag filled with odds and ends, bits of twine, stones, colorful paper. "This is the treasure of stories," she said, her enthusiasm bubbling over. "Each item can spark a new world." Jonathan watched as they all sat down on the living room floor, the energy shifting from tense uncertainty to something invigorating. The room transformed. What felt confining moments before now radiated warmth, underscored by Mia's infectious glee and Agnes's creative energy. "Let's build a story together," Agnes proposed, sorting through the contents of her bag. "Every object is a character, a setting, or a conflict. What you have here is not just junk, it's potential waiting to be unleashed." Mia's eyes danced with delight as she selected a shiny pebble. "That can be a knight," she proclaimed, her excitement infectious. Jonathan remained quiet, observing. He felt like an outsider observing creativity unraveling in a world he had long restrained. Agnes's approach enthralled him. It reminded him of the letting go he had experienced earlier with Mia in their makeshift kingdom. Each interaction, every laugh, solidified that Jonathan's own constrictions were collapsing. "Perhaps, while you're building this world, you could also begin to question the world outside," Agnes suggested. There was a knowing glint in her gaze, and Jonathan sensed her words cut deeper than he had expected. "You see, stories mirror our truths, the ones we dare and the ones we suppress." In that moment, Jonathan's heart pounded. He understood she was probing beneath his surface. Could he recalibrate his professional relationships to include this kind of curiosity and compassion? The challenges he would face outside of this room seemed daunting, but not insurmountable. Agnes's presence catalyzed an epiphany. He realized he needed to explore what it would take to rekindle those connections in the workplace, to arrive as a leader who embraced the humanity in every interaction. With each shared story, Jonathan felt cracks beneath his facade deepen. In that small living room, as laughter bubbled and ideas flowed, he was finally confronting the uncomfortable complexities of himself. "Maybe I can become like that knight," he thought suddenly, contemplating the metaphor a little too literally. "Could I wield empowerment as a tool for the atmosphere around me?" Mia's joy carried on, but Jonathan could hear his own internal dialogue clashing with the remnants of a past life built around aloofness and ambition. With the powerful reminder of what lay within reach, he prepared for the most significant decision of all, the leap into a realm where human connection reigns supreme. As the session flowed seamlessly, he sensed the tremors of his past thoughts racing back to him. Could he steer his career in a manner reflecting this newfound clarity? Just as the question settled in his mind, the first inkling of doubt crept in. Was he ready to face the challenges waiting outside, saying goodbye to the embrace of creativity for the cold realities of a corporation that might resist his newfound vision? As he pondered his next move, an unsettling thought surfaced. What if striking this balance meant learning to navigate not just his office's corporate policies, but also the intricate human emotions and connections buried beneath them? As the afternoon sun began to wane, casting a softer glow through the living room window, Jonathan found himself swept up in the tidal wave of creativity that Agnes had orchestrated. Every chuckle from Mia, every word from Agnes felt like a challenging nudge, prompting him to unravel and redefine his own narrative. "Why can't adults play?" Agnes's question pierced Jonathan's introspection. He watched Mia, fully immersed in the world they were creating around her, the night, the mysterious forest, and the dragons that flew high above the clouds. Her imagination soared in a way he could only envy. "You see, Jonathan," she continued, "dates, deadlines, and responsibilities can stifle creativity. Adults carry their burdens like heavy stones, while children dance lightly on their feet. You must learn to carry both." Her gaze fixated on him as if she could read the thoughts racing through his mind. He shifted slightly, uncomfortable with the weight of her observation. Was he really ready to confront the obstacles he had built around himself? "What if I fail?" he blurted out, surprised at the vulnerability in his voice. Agnes smiled knowingly. "Failure is merely the first step to success if you allow yourself to learn from it. Remember, creativity thrives in the fertile soil of trial and error." The words stirred something deep within him. In the corporate world, he had built a reputation on seamless execution, fearing mistakes above all else. Agnes's perspective felt foreign yet tantalizing. Was there a path that blended the rigidity of his professional life with the freedom of the imaginative journey unfolding before him? As they crafted stories, Jonathan experimented with the knight character infused with traits that mirrored his own apprehensions, displaying resilience and fierce loyalty. He attempted to let his imagination flow, searching for connections that might carry through to his real life. Would embracing these ideas allow him to establish a workplace where creativity flourished? "Let's create an obstacle for our knight," Agnes encouraged, a twinkle in her eye. "Every great hero faces a challenge that shifts their course." Mia eagerly proposed, "What if the knight has to save the village from a dragon's fire?" Just like that, they were thrust back into an adventure, and Jonathan sensed a strange liberation overtaking him. With every twist in their story, every dilemma the knight faced, and every potential failure they navigated, Jonathan began to see parallels between the fictional realm they were building and his corporate environment. How well did he know his team's fears and aspirations? Had he ever been courageous enough to confront the unspoken challenges within their walls? The narrative deepened, reflecting choices he had long avoided. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, Jonathan felt his outsider status crumbling as he engaged. With newfound resolve, he crafted an ending where the knight not only prevailed, but inspired loyalty and collaboration among his fellow villagers. "What if my office could be like this?" he mused aloud. "Could I foster an environment where people are encouraged to share ideas without fear?" Agnes gave him an approving nod. "Each story is a stepping stone, my friend. Mold them into lessons you believe in. When you step into the world, do so bearing the richness of your play." As they wrapped up their session, a sense of exhilaration enveloped Jonathan. He had tasted the raw power of vulnerability and connection in a way that he had shied away from for years. The tug-of-war within him had shifted towards clarity. And then, as if tugging him back into doubt, a new thought intruded. What would his colleagues say about his revelations? Would they dismiss his ambition to create a nurturing workplace, or would they embrace it? The fear of judgment lingered in his gut, mirroring the trepidation of standing before a dragon. "Tomorrow," he whispered to himself, "I'll take a step. I'll share what I learned." But just as quickly, anxiety tightened around him. The stakes felt high, and questions crowded his mind like shadows. Was he really prepared to unveil this new side of himself? Would he recognize the courage needed to lead amidst entrenched skepticism? As the sun slipped below the horizon, leaving the living room in twilight, Jonathan knew that the battles outside these walls paled in comparison to the ambitions swirling inside him. But the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. Where would those first steps lead him, and would he find the support he hoped for? The moment of reckoning loomed, and Jonathan could feel it drawing closer. The morning light filtered into Jonathan's apartment, a stark contrast to the trembling thoughts that consumed him. Today would mark a shift. His decision to share his newfound insights mingled with a more visceral tension, the gnawing fear of exposing vulnerability in the hardened walls of corporate culture. He dressed in his usual attire, the tailored suit that felt like armor, as if to shield him from impending scrutiny. His mind betrayed him, cycling through worst-case scenarios, laughter from a colleague, blank stares, or worse, dismissals that would echo through the office. Yet, beneath that apprehension, curiosity flickered. What if this effort sparked connection rather than derision? As he walked into the office building, every step weighed heavily on him, like wading through a swamp of anxiety. The familiar sights of cubicles and fluorescent lights felt stifling today, an oppressive reminder of the very environment he wanted to transform. He spotted his colleagues, engrossed in their tasks, their faces reflecting a spectrum of concerns that mirrored his own. Did they share the same unspoken longings for creativity, to escape their heavy burdens? Jonathan hesitated at the edge of the meeting room, catching snippets of discussion, plans, numbers, deadlines. It was all there, but today those topics seemed to pale in comparison to the ideas swirling in his mind. "Are we just knights in business armor, adorned but weary?" he questioned silently. Taking a deep breath, Jonathan pushed the door open. The room fell silent, a chorus of inquisitive eyes turning towards him. The weight of their attention bore down, but underneath, a flicker of resolve surged. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice unexpectedly steady, "about how we can innovate our work culture." What unfolded next was unexpected. Jonathan, fueled by the recent revelations during their storytelling sessions, conveyed his desire for more collaborative practices, an environment free from the constraints that limited their creativity. He spoke of courage, vulnerability, and transformation. His heart raced. This was vulnerability, raw and unfiltered, on display. At first, his colleagues responded with skepticism, eyebrows raised and arms crossed. Doubts took form, like dragons hovering just out of reach, ready to ignite flames of ridicule. But as he wove in the analogies from his story, detailing how every great knight faces dragons of doubt and fear, the mood began to shift. They were no longer just numbers and metrics. They became part of an unfolding narrative where they could partake in the creation of something impactful. His passion resonated, glimmers of intrigue breaking his peers' initial facade of cynicism. "Why should we mold our environment into an encouraging space?" one colleague impulsively challenged, inviting the first flurry of questions he had anticipated. "Because as a team, we all should carry lighter burdens," he replied, tapping into the very essence of their collective struggles. Creativity thrives in a safe space, where ideas are born from exchange rather than competition. Suddenly, an unexpected voice chimed in, a junior designer typically quiet and observant. "I've felt that way too. What if we set aside time for brainstorming, even if it doesn't directly relate to our projects?" The suggestion hung in the air, and slowly a chorus of nods emerged. The discussion transformed from a battle of skepticism to one of excitement and possibility. Ideas cascaded, and Jonathan listened, allowing the room to fill with contributions, different perspectives, hopes, and even fears. Walls not only of silence but of guardedness cracked open. As the meeting drew to a close, Jonathan felt electric. He had ignited a dormant spark with his words, and perhaps more importantly, with his willingness to be vulnerable. The anxiety that accompanied him was dissipating, replaced by a burgeoning sense of purpose. Yet, as his colleagues left the room, a question lingered in the recesses of his thoughts. Had he merely scratched the surface? Was this tentative breakthrough sufficient to sustain the momentum, or would the day-to-day pressures extinguish the light he had ignited? Outside the office, a sense of urgency flared within him. Would these ideas thrive, or would the dragons of doubt come roaring back? Jonathan glanced around, heart beating fiercely, pondering his next move. He sensed the need to follow through, to make real changes, but fear of faltering loomed in the corners of his mind. Tomorrow would demand action. The choices he made today could forge a new path, but distance remained between intention and execution. With determination in his stride, Jonathan stepped out into the hallway, ready to conquer the doubts that lingered. The moment to translate his vision into reality was dawning, and he could feel the stakes growing higher. What had begun as a glimmer of aspiration now threatened to spark a much bigger challenge. Did he have what it takes to see this through, or would the emerging doubts claw their way back to the forefront? He was prepared to act, but the real question loomed. Would he seize the opportunity or let fear dictate his fate? The next morning, Jonathan woke with a sense of restless anticipation coursing through him. The sun's rays no longer felt like a soft illumination. Instead, they served as a spotlight on his decisions, awakening his mind with a kaleidoscope of potential outcomes. Today couldn't be just another routine day. He had to keep the momentum alive. As he dressed, his gaze lingered on the tailored suit, less a shield and more a reminder of the identity he wished to reshape. Through the fabric, he could feel the echoes of yesterday's meeting embellishing his confidence. The dust of doubt still clung to him, but beneath it lay a glimmer of clarity. He was not just an employee. He was now a catalyst for change. During breakfast, he found himself replaying the discussion in his mind, replaying the shift in dynamics as if it were a pivotal scene from a movie he couldn't quite recall. Every idea exchanged seemed imbued with a sense of ownership unfamiliar to him. His colleagues had, for the first time, begun to see themselves as part of a tapestry woven from their shared desires for creativity and support. The imagery of that room, filled with excitement, pushed him forward, but he also needed structure, a plan to keep the enthusiasm alive. After reaching the office, Jonathan felt a pulse of electricity in the air, a kind of shared anxiety transforming into curiosity. He resolved to harness that. He needed to turn fleeting thoughts into actionable steps if he truly wanted to shift the corporate culture. With a keen focus, he started drafting a proposal for a more structured creative collaboration initiative. This time, he wouldn't wait for directives from above. He would take the initiative himself. As he typed, thoughts cascaded onto the page. Designated brainstorming sessions, an online platform to share ideas beyond meetings, and regular check-ins to assess emotional well-being. Every stroke of the keyboard felt like a step towards something larger, a movement he was gradually giving birth to within himself and his work environment. Moments later, Emily, a close colleague and fellow skeptic from yesterday's meeting, approached his office. He felt the familiar twinge of apprehension as she eyed his screen. "You're really serious about this, aren't you?" she asked, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. Jonathan nodded, swallowing hard. "I think I need to take this further. We can't just talk about change. We need to be proactive. If we don't act now, it'll fade." Emily leaned slightly closer, her brow furrowing. "And if it backfires, what happens then?" The weight of her question hung in the air, a formless challenge. As Jonathan contemplated, he felt an old fear rising to the surface, the pitfalls of vulnerability, the risk of facing judgment from those he once feared. But he reminded himself of the shifting energy from the meeting. Then we learn from it. What if we open ourselves up to refining our approach? We'll adapt. I'd rather fail trying to create an encouraging space than win by maintaining the status quo. A smile crept across her face, the skepticism waning as she considered his words. "You're right, that's not typically how we operate, but maybe it's time we try something different together. I can help." Relief washed over Jonathan, a quiet triumph mingled with a growing sense of responsibility. Crafting this initiative was no longer a solitary endeavor, it was becoming a collaborative effort. His heart raced with renewed possibilities, igniting a fire that echoed from yesterday's meeting, a network of support forming around him. As they began to outline their approach, ideas flowed unrestricted. But a lingering concern gnawed at him, tugging subtly at the corner of his mind. Could he maintain this newfound vulnerability in the face of inevitable adversity? The clock ticked as Jonathan and Emily fleshed out the finer points of their proposal, each second pressing against him like a countdown. It was an exhilarating yet daunting endeavor, one that required more than just courage. It necessitated an unwavering commitment to ongoing risk. As they finalized their plan, a flicker of anxiety sparked within him, a familiar yet perilous sensation weighing heavily on his heart. With time running short, Jonathan couldn't shake off the creeping thought that, while one chapter was evolving, another confrontation lay on the horizon. He could already sense it, a looming test where the dragons from before could emerge, ready to chew through his resolve. "Tomorrow's our presentation," Jonathan said, feeling the weight of expectation borne by each breath. "We need to present this right." Emily's encouraging nod sparked hope. "We'll make it work, Jonathan, together." Yet as they parted, he couldn't dismiss the internal voice whispering fears of inadequacy and potential backlash. It mirrored back the broader implications of their endeavor. Would their vision survive the scrutiny of the corporate landscape, or would it quickly become a ghost of possibility? Jonathan walked away from the desk, heart racing. He was on the brink of something profound, but he couldn't ignore the shadows creeping up from behind, standing ready to confront the very essence of his aspirations. Feeling the walls of the office close in, Jonathan pondered his next move. Tomorrow he would face not only the room full of wary colleagues, but also the specter of his own doubt. Would he stumble, or could he leverage his newfound strength against the encroaching fears? The question loomed larger than life, demanding an answer that only time would reveal. The morning sun cast long shadows across Jonathan's office as he faced the day he had been both anticipating and dreading. He could feel the weight of his proposal pressing against him, heavy like a stone in his backpack. Today was the presentation, the moment of truth when his vision would either be embraced or dismissed. Thought nudged him towards the edge of panic. Sipping his lukewarm coffee, Jonathan recalled Emily's last words, "We'll make it work, Jonathan, together." The reassurance felt distant, caught in the hazy fog of anxiety that clouded his mind. He had taken the initiative, yet he couldn't shake the sensation of walking a tightrope. One wrong move could send him crashing down. The very fear that had often paralyzed him in the past resurfaced with vicious clarity. He stood up, straightening his tie and reminding himself of one key element: preparation was his ally. His fingers brushed against the proposal as though it were a talisman against doubt. Deep down, beyond the swirling uncertainties, he felt a flicker of hope ignite. Jonathan had always considered himself a cautious man. Spontaneity was like a foreign language he struggled to grasp. But this was different. He had crossed a threshold into uncharted territory, ready to lead not just as an employee, but as a pioneer. As he made his way down the hall, he sought out Emily. She sat at her desk, surrounded by a great deal of clutter that mirrored the chaos of his thoughts. When she caught sight of him, her resolve seemed palpable, and she motioned for him to join her. "You ready?" she asked, a lilt of encouragement in her voice. "I think so." The words came out more like a question than a declaration. "But I can't stop thinking about all the what-ifs." Emily leaned back, folding her arms thoughtfully. "What if it succeeds? What if we shake things up? You focused on the positives yesterday." Jonathan knew she was right. Still, his mind raced through potential critiques from their coworkers. He envisioned skeptical faces, crossed arms, and derisive snickers, a scene that felt all too familiar. Panic began to swell within him. "Jonathan," Emily interrupted, her voice softer but firm, "you're not alone in this. The fact that you're even here, about to present, shows courage. Remember, you're not just pitching an idea, you're advocating for a cultural shift." The weight of her words provided a momentary balm. The tension in his chest eased, even if just a fraction. He took a breath, his resolve solidifying. "You're right, I can do this." With a renewed determination, Jonathan straightened his posture and moved towards the conference room, his heartbeat synchronizing with the brisk pace of his steps. The team was gathering, and he could feel the energy in the air, a mix of skepticism, curiosity, and perhaps lingering hope. As he entered, he was struck by the sight of familiar faces turned toward him. Some were eager, some uncertain, but all were here, part of this moment. Jonathan's heart raced, and a part of him regretted not taking the extra time to breathe and prepare. Nonetheless, he reminded himself, this was not just about him, it was about them, about fostering a space where creativity could flourish. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady despite the tremor of his excitement. "Today, I want to present not just a proposal, but a vision for what our work culture can truly become." As he continued, the words began to flow with more ease, each sentence unveiling the passion that had ignited within him. Yet, as he presented, an unsettling inkling clung to the edges of his mind. What if the reaction was lukewarm? What if they dismissed his ideas as frivolous? The fear was creeping back, distracting him just as he sought to engage his audience. Midway through the presentation, he glanced at Emily, who nodded in encouragement. He pressed on, infusing his speech with everything he felt, even as doubt twisted in his gut. They were entering the heart of the pitch, where revelations illuminated the path he envisioned, yet the shadows of past failures dusked the corners of his consciousness. Every one of you has a stake in this. I want each of us to not only share ideas, but courageously embrace them. Jonathan's voice escalated, his passion lending a fierceness with each syllable. It was as though he was attempting to forge a connection as much within himself as with the audience. As he concluded, confident but still apprehensive, he sensed the shift in the room, somewhat unsettling, yet delicately charged. The silence was thick, filled with unspoken words and lingering judgments. His heart raced as he awaited their reactions. Then, just as the room seemed to narrow, an unexpected voice broke through the tension. A challenge that would inevitably test the very foundation of his newfound resolve. "But what if it doesn't work?" a colleague countered. The question hung in the air like a guillotine, poised to sever Jonathan's burgeoning confidence from the future he envisioned. He felt his pulse quicken, knowing that now was the moment to confront this fear head-on. Could he redefine himself in the eyes of his peers? This was the test he had foreseen, and the urgency of the situation compelled him to respond with authenticity. He had to dig deep to find the courage to turn this moment of potential judgment into an opportunity for dialogue. Would he rise to the challenge, or could this mark a fracture in the nascent relationship he had begun to foster with his colleagues? "Let's discuss that," Jonathan replied, fighting against the surging tide of doubt. The room shifted, and with it, the stakes of this personal odyssey climbed higher. He realized, as he looked around at the faces both eager and wary, that this dialogue would be pivotal, not just for his proposal, but for his evolution as a professional. Would the next move solidify his transformation, or would it unravel the delicate fabric he'd started to weave? Jonathan sat at his desk, the remnants of yesterday's exhilarating presentation still lingering in the air like a charged current. The boardroom discussion had ignited a spark within him, an unmistakable shift in the atmosphere around his work. Colleagues had begun to look beyond their immediate tasks, expressing genuine interest in nurturing creative collaboration. Yet, beneath that buoyant enthusiasm, a sense of urgency gripped him. Breaking free from the strictures of conventional success wasn't simply a personal victory. It was, in many ways, a collective responsibility. As the days wore on, he realized that he had embarked on a path not only to reshape his workspace, but to redefine his role as a father and a leader, loyal to truth, empathy, and connection. Each day, he sought to embody these values, encouraging open dialogues and seeking input from every team member. Slowly but surely, the culture around him began to transform. Ideas flourished, and his colleagues started sharing their aspirations freely, no longer shackled by fear of critique. Jonathan's heart swelled with pride each time he witnessed the familiar atmosphere shift into one filled with creativity and desire for collaboration. But the most profound transformation occurred when he found the courage to bring these principles home. One evening, sitting across from Mia at dinner, he marveled at how different moments of their lives were becoming intertwined. The games they played, the stories they shared, began to reflect the same lessons he had learned during that pivotal exchange with Clara and the wisdom from Agnes. "Daddy, when we play knights, can we make the kingdom help everyone?" Mia asked, her innocent gaze fixed intently upon him. In that moment, Jonathan felt a rush of clarity wash over him. This was the crux of true success. Helping others to succeed created a legacy far richer than any corporate accolade ever would. "Of course, my sweet girl, we can build a kingdom where everyone has a role, where kindness is the greatest treasure," he replied, the warmth spreading through him as they imagined scenarios together. Their laughter wove golden threads through their lives, and each story became a reminder of how he wished to parent and lead. As they crafted imaginative tales, Jonathan felt renewed by a deep-seated belief. Sometimes, the strongest foundations are built on empathy rather than ambition. Through these exchanges, he solidified the understanding that life's success isn't measured in earnings or titles, Instead, it revolved around human connection, authenticity, and leading by example. It wasn't until Friday that the culmination of this new foundation was about to unfold. Later that afternoon in the office, Jonathan stood before the team, vibrant energy radiating from him as he shared the success they had collectively achieved together over the past weeks. As he highlighted instances where creativity had directly resulted in improved collaboration and productivity, he could sense the glimmer of newfound recognition amongst his colleagues. Today is a celebration, not just of our accomplishments, but of our journey as a team. Each of you embodies the spirit of transparency, and it is this essence that has transformed our workspace. Let's continue to lead with kindness, daring to challenge the status quo, Jonathan proclaimed, his voice steady and resolute. The room erupted into applause, not just for him, but for the entire team. Jonathan smiled, feeling an unfamiliar lightness envelop him, an awareness that he had successfully demonstrated profound professional and personal growth. This was the moment he had walked towards, no longer a man confined by rigid definitions of success. He had become a leader who understood the value of connection, not just in boardroom discussions, but in the lives of those he influenced. Just weeks ago, he had felt terrified and isolated in a world driven by competition. Now, he stood surrounded by colleagues who had embraced a culture of collaboration. The once silent doubts transformed into resounding affirmations, echoes of shared aspirations validating his choice to leap into authenticity. As the clock struck 5, Jonathan returned home, buoyant and energized. He found Mia sprawled on the floor, surrounded by a sea of blocks. "Daddy, look, we're building the kingdom," she exclaimed, her face radiating joy. "Let's finish it together," he replied, kneeling to join her, feeling an overwhelming sense of fulfillment wrap around him. Jonathan, the man who once feared vulnerability and connection, had now achieved a relationship with his daughter rooted in collaboration and creativity, an achievement that made him feel whole. In that moment, he recognized the profound transformation within himself. He was no longer just a businessman, but a father who conquered the fears of insincerity, discovering riches in authenticity, kindness, and love. As he laughed and played alongside Mia, he found himself embracing the real success he had long sought, the ability to create meaningful bonds. And the realization became clear, as buoyant as the laughter echoing in their cozy living room. True wealth was the legacy of values instilled in their hearts, a kingdom built on love, kindness, and community connection that would resonate for generations to come. Now is the time to take action. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire you. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us spread messages of achievement and growth. Comment your reactions and theories about this powerful conclusion and share this moment with your friends. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this incredible journey of transformation and connection.